So Mizzou just beat Iowa in the Music City Bowl 27-24 in an overall very good matchup, a hard-fought comeback from the Mizzou Tigers. And with me being a Missouri Tigers fan, I mean, that's how I got the name Drew Lockburner. I mean, Drew Lock went to Mizzou and all that. I thought it'd be pretty interesting to go back and just look over their season, because this was quite the interesting year for the Tigers. Before we talk about 2024, we have to go back to 2023, and Mizzou was easily the most shocking team in all of college football this season. They went 10-2, shocked everyone. No one was expecting them to be this good, and they got an invitation to the Cotton Bowl, a New Year's Six bowl game, and they would beat Ohio State 14-3. Now, granted, Ohio State was missing a lot of their guys, but for Mizzou, it was a perfect ending to a very surprising and shocking year. And not only that, but Eli Drinkwitz would win SEC Coach of the Year. Now, one of the reasons this Mizzou team was so good was because of the defense, as their defense ranked 26th in points allowed. And not only that, but it had a lot of future NFL talent on this defense as well, which was led by Darius Robinson, who was a first-round pick this season, linebacker Tyron Hopper, cornerback Chris Abrams-Drain, and arguably the best player on this defense, cornerback Ennis Rakestraw Jr., who got drafted by the Lions in the second round and hasn't really gotten a chance to play yet in the NFL, but I can guarantee you, once he gets that shot, dude is going to be a baller. But you could argue the offense was even better, as they ranked 29th in points per game, and they were led by quarterback Brady Cook, who, entering the 2023 season, wasn't well liked by the fan base. In fact, he was booed at one game. I forgot what it was, but he was booed, and Eli Drinkwitz got pretty mad. But 2023 was a very good season for Brady Cook. Over 3,000 yards, 21 touchdowns, and 6 interceptions. The receiving room was equally as impressive, as receivers like Mookie Cooper and Theo Weiss were very productive, but by far the biggest shining star of the receiving room was Luther Burden, as he had over 1,000 yards receiving and 9 touchdowns, as he became one of the best receivers in college football that season. But the best player and the heart and soul of not just this offense, but this entire Mizzou team was running back Cody Schrader, as in 2023, he became one of the best players in college football, as he ran for over 1,600 yards and 14 touchdowns, and he finished 7th in Heisman voting. Truly one of the best seasons I've seen from a college athlete, and by far by a Mizzou player. Sadly for Mizzou, Cody Schrader had used his final year of eligibility, and even though we were losing NFL talent players and Cody Schrader would end up going undrafted, Cody Schrader would easily be the hardest guy to replace on this entire team. Dude was the heart and soul. So even though we had other reinforcements and other good players and a bright future for 2024, it was going to be really hard to replace this guy. Like I said, even though we were losing NFL talent and we were losing the heart and soul of the team in Cody Schrader, the future was still bright, as we were bringing back Brady Cook, Mookie Cooper, Theo Weiss, and most importantly Luther Burden, who was projected to be one of the best players in college football in 2024. We also did pretty well in the recruiting and transfer portal. I don't know why I said the recruiting, but we did pretty well recruiting and in the transfer portal, as we were bringing in Nate Noel and Marcus Carroll to be our replacements at running back. So you bring back a lot of the main offensive weapons. Not only that, but you bring in some reinforcements in the transfer portal and recruiting. Not only that, but we have a relatively easy schedule compared to not just the college football world, but the rest of the SEC, as the main tough opponents this season for Mizzou was going to be on the road at Kyle Field against Texas A&M, on the road in Tuscaloosa against Alabama, and against Oklahoma. Thankfully, we were playing in Columbia. So you mix in a relatively easy schedule with the momentum we were carrying in for the Cotton Bowl win and the overall 2023 season. A lot of Mizzou fans, including me, thought Mizzou was going to be pretty dang good this season. Maybe potentially a lock, not a lock, but potentially making the college football playoff. Alright, enough talking. How did the 2024 season go for the Mizzou Tigers? Now, the first 2 games were easy peasy lemon squeezy, as we beat up on Murray State and Buffalo 51-0 and 38-0, and that's expected when you're playing 2 cupcakes teams and you're a top 10 team in the nation. After these 2 wins, Mizzou would jump into number 6 in the AP poll, as they were playing well, and not only that, but teams ahead of them were just kind of sucking. I'm talking to Florida State and Utah. But those next 2 games would really question not just Mizzou fans, but the entire college football world how good this Tigers team really was, as we would play Boston College, who was ranked at the time, and it would be a very tight game, but we would win 27-21. Even though they were ranked at that time, it was still a little bit concerning. But it was that next week against Vanderbilt that really made us look like frauds. I mean, we went into double overtime against freaking Vanderbilt. We would win 30-27, but still, that's a game that really just, I don't know, no words could describe how I was feeling at that time. I felt like we were frauds. I felt like, man, we aren't who we were meant to be. And Vanderbilt, this was before they beat Bama. This was before we knew how good they were really going to be this season, but still, just a terrible look. But then that very next week, everyone's theories about us being frauds came true, as we would get whooped on the road by number 25 Texas A&M 41-10, and this was just such a tough pill to swallow because, I mean, yeah, we were frauds, and it was going to be very hard to climb back to possibly being in the college football playoff. Now, we would get a 9 bounce-back win on the road against UMass, 45-3. By the way, you really don't see a Power 4 team just go on the road against a team like UMass in the middle of the season. Just very random, but that very next week against Auburn was a huge struggle, as Brady Cook would get injured, sent to the hospital, and we were trailing for most of the game. But then Brady Cook came back from the hospital and led Mizzou to a comeback victory on homecoming. Truly a season-defining moment, in my opinion. Through all the disappointment, we can point back to Brady Cook's resilience throughout the entire season, and especially in that game. And we can look back on this and say, hey, it wasn't too bad of a season after all. And I'm going to talk about that later on. However, Brady Cook would be out for 2 games, so in stepped in Drew Pine. And I think I'm saying that last name right. And he sucked. He was terrible. And one of the games he played in was against Alabama. And we really didn't need him to play. We needed Brady Cook. And we lost 34-0. One of the worst games I've seen from Mizzou ever. But then the next game against Oklahoma was one of my favorite of all time as a Mizzou fan, as Theo Weiss would have a legacy-defying moment as he would get the game-tying touchdown against Oklahoma, and then we would get a scoop and score to win the game 30-23. Rekindling an old rivalry back from the days of the Big 12. Brady Cook would come back against South Carolina, and we would suffer a pretty heartbreaking loss in that game as the defense completely choked in the final minute, and then we would beat up on a pretty bad Mississippi State team that final week, and then to cap it off against Arkansas, who we own, by the way, one of the most beautiful games I've seen in Mizzou history. The snow was on the ground. It was beautiful, and it came down to the final Mizzou and Arkansas drive as Brady Cook, and his final play as a Mizzou Tiger at Farrett Field, he would run in for a touchdown, giving Mizzou the lead, and then we would stop Arkansas on defense, capping off an era of Mizzou football history. And then, like I said at the beginning of the video, the season ended by beating Iowa 27-24 in the Music City Bowl. We were down 10, and then we got a touchdown, and then Blake Craig hit 2 very clutch field goals to send us home with a victory. But to recap the season, I think it's very easy to look at the season as a whole as disappointing, especially after the A&M loss and the Bama loss and the South Carolina loss. But there were so many positives as well, especially in the second half of the season where Brady Cook comes back and beats Auburn in the homecoming game even though he was injured. And then we had those 2 very clutch touchdowns against Oklahoma to beat our rivals and rekindle a rivalry. And then not only that, but Brady Cook's final play as a Mizzou Tiger was a go-ahead touchdown against our rivals in Arkansas. And then what happened in the Music City Bowl, ending the season off with a 10-win season. We very could have well been 7-5, 7-6. But instead, we're 10-3, going home with a top 20, clinching a top 20 spot in the top 25, and going home, like I said, with a 10-win season. It's very easy to look at all this and say, man, this was a disappointing season, but we are walking home with a 10-win season. Like I said, Brady Cook solidified himself as one of the best quarterbacks in Mizzou history, and Luther Burden didn't get as involved as we liked him to, but he's easily going to be a first-round pick in the NFL. There's a lot to be happy about as well, and that's kind of my takeaway of the whole Mizzou season this season. Yeah, whatever. But I mean, hey, that's about it for the video, guys. Jesus loves you, and goodbye.